What's up everybody, it's Prof Smoke, and today we're gonna paint this Gamecube shiny. For this custom Gamecube, I'm gonna do a Celebi paint job. There's a Game Boy Advance that has a really nice metallic green. So I'm mimicking that metallic green. We're using Montana spray cans. They work well on plastic, so it's just an obvious choice. They also have really cool metallics. I really like Montana spray cans. Just doing a bunch of layers, making sure to get thin, multiple layers on the whole thing, let them dry in between sprays. Then we do a little clear coat at the end to protect the paint job. This mixture that I'm painting on the back plate, face plate, and handle is Mod Podge mixed with some black paint. We're just coating the whole thing in that mixture, getting many thick coats. We want to cover the whole thing in this so that we have a great surface to paint on, because acrylic paint doesn't go onto plastic. Once we've built up enough layers of this Mod Podge and black paint, we're going to start going in with grays. I always like to do dark to light colors when sculpting, because with every lighter color we do a little bit less and we bring out all the nice texture in it. And with this kind of project, where I've gone in with knives on the faceplate of the GameCube to create cuts and undulations and all these things that I didn't get to show in the video, now we're bringing out all those little details with these lighter and lighter colors. This is a great way to bring out your texture with a small amount of work, because all we do is get a tiny bit of paint on the brush, I brush it on my skin until it doesn't fill in the texture, and we just get a little bit on top of the grain of my skin. I know it sounds weird, but it works really well. And then we can just very lightly brush that color on in very small places. All the colors shine through and it turns out great. I'm taking some polymer clay and making a disc the size of the GameCube's jewel. Later, after we bake it in the oven, we're going to glue it onto the jewel, so I want it to be about the size. If it's a little bigger, that's fine too. Now I'm going in with some dental tools to kind of carve or scribe the texture and lines of the Relic Stone's platform from the Relic Forest. This is based on the Relic Forest / Relic Stone from Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon XD. This is where you purify your Pokemon, and Celebi sometimes will come out and purify one for you, so it's just a really cool Celebi area. We're just laying down temporary lines and shallow details. Later, after we bake it, I'm going to use a number of techniques to actually get deep lines into this, but some of these thin lines are going to be really important too, because where I can't get to with those deeper carving tools, we'll have this small amount of detail, and it's just enough detail to look really nice as well. This is the first time I've used this technique, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's just pretty much like freehand drawing, and I've been practicing drawing quite a bit lately, so it was pretty easy and fun. I'm really happy to be sculpting a project like this. Since I was a little kid, I've wanted to sculpt a lot of areas from video games, movies, TV shows. I always felt like, for the most part, people hadn't ever like made these areas. People hadn't like created like figures or just created these areas other than the original authors. And it's kind of my like Christopher Columbus like exploration thing that I've just always wanted to be the first person to make these things, or not even the first person, but to be able to kind of relive what it was like for these video game makers to create these amazing iconic areas and characters. So yeah, I'm just really happy to be making this because I've wanted to sculpt areas from Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon XD since I was like 9 years old or 10 years old whenever it came out. So I'm going in with a number of techniques now to add texture to it. A toothbrush gives you a nice like rough tongue-y texture. It's really good for stone as well. It gives you those little divots, kind of like dry little bumps. And then I go in with that to add a little bit of undulation and some little holes into it. All these different things just help to make it more rock-like. The toothbrush is probably the most important texturing thing that we're doing here, but then I just go back through and retrace my lines so if anything got filled in, and we bake it right in the oven at 275. Now I'm using a Dremel tool. It's a nice rotary tool. It's obviously disc shaped, so there's limitations with it, so I just do all the straight lines going outwards first. And then we do, so those would be the vertical lines. Then we go in for the horizontal lines. And anything I can't do with the Dremel tool, I go in with an X-Acto knife and some other knives to touch up. So we're just kind of going back over all the lines we've already made. And some of those lines are still there from our first thing, so I didn't even have to go over them. For example, the ring around the outside edge, I didn't even have to go over that at all because I just, drew it pretty deep. Yeah, just really going back over all those lines and adding just a little bit of damage to it because it needs to be weathered like real stone. Stone weathers over time, and Celebi is kind of a time-based Pokemon too, so it's good for the Relic Stone to be like very, very old. Maybe Celebi's traveled it through time a bunch of times or something where it's like really, really old. I don't know, but it just looks really cool. I'm using some pieces of clay to add the like higher tier of the platform. So the platform has kind of indents downwards, and then these parts that are more raised. So I'm just getting those perfect shapes, and we're gonna bake them in the oven, and then we'll just glue them right into place. And before, when I carved the lines were, some of the lines were in the shape of these platforms that I'm making so that I know exactly where they go. And just sanding up the edges, getting everything nice and round. The Dremel tool is really good to sand things quickly as well because it just rotates really fast. You get a little sandpaper doodad on there. I'm just freehand carving these lines since I had already baked it in the oven. I think they turned out fine, just a real quick wachow, ka-chow. I really like incorporating the Dremel tool, but it is a bit messy and it creates a lot of dust because you're always carving something away with it. Just using a bit of super glue here as well. I used a generous amount because I want this to be on here very solid, but in the next step we're going to cover the whole thing in black paint mixed with Mod Podge, which is a glue, so that'll also help reinforce it. I'm sure that this thing is going to be just extremely strong by the time I'm done with it. All the paints that I use for this are pretty much the same ones I use on the front panel and the back panel. I went through all the same steps, all the same techniques, so we're just kind of seeing what happened there a second time. Obviously starting with black, building up from light to dark to light colors. We have gray, a lighter gray than that, a lighter gray than that, and then white on top. And what the white does is it acts as the light. So let's say that I had something reflecting off of an object nearby, or if there's a glow in the air from Celebi, like a green glow or something, the white parts, the final dry brushing of white, that's where I would add just those colors just a tiny bit in that white so that we get that reflection, we get that glow, and you'll see that later on as well. I'm using a little bit of green to add kind of a mossiness to it. In the actual game, there's some like mossy stuff growing there, and there's also green source lighting coming from the actual Relic Stone. So I did make it mossy, but I also did have the light glow. I tried to have a little bit of both, so it would seem nice and natural. I decided to go on with some darker greens and some yellow just to kind of give a lot of variation in these moss patches. You know, when you see moss, it's not all alive, it's not all that nice green. The edges are kind of dying, and part of it's really alive. So I did that, and I also added some of these self-adhesive tufts of grass onto some of the spots. I felt that since Celebi is a grass type Pokemon, having all this nice plant life kind of like creeping up on there would be really cool. In between some of these layers, I'm actually going back over it with white and just getting the edges of all this stone to have that nice white dry brushed texture. The white on the edges of the stone slabs is really important. Some of you guys will recognize this foam from the rock poke spot. I carved some mountains with this foam. It's just really nice, really lightweight. So I carved some little cylinders that we can stack up. Then I'm looking at an image, or multiple images actually, of the Relic Stone so we can carve chunks out of this thing. Now I like to go for a little bit more of a realistic vibe with everything I sculpt, so I'm not trying to make it perfectly exactly like the Relic Stone. There's stylistic choices that all artists make, so yeah, I'm just trying to make it similar, pretty close. So I took a toothpick here and I just kebabbed them all together, and then I take glue. I did super glue on the Q-tip before I kebabbed them, and then I did Elmer's glue wall after I kebabbed them. So what that does is just glues it all together into one solid thing. Once that dries, I'm taking glue mixed with black paint and covering the whole thing in multiple thick layers of that, because we want this to be as strong as possible. This is the weakest part of the sculpture as far as the structural integrity, so it's really important that I do everything I can, because if someone accidentally bumps this, it's still gonna break. There's nothing I can do, but maybe this will help. Maybe someone could bump it and it wouldn't break entirely. So I just want to do everything I can. And we're going through all of the same exact steps as on the stone here as well. Black paint to gray paint to lighter gray, lighter gray, lighter gray, white. And then we're doing our nice green and dark green patches and everything to give us the moss look. Now I want the stone to have a little bit of a glow coming from it. So I did a little bit more green on the stone than any other parts of the GameCube. Initially I had wanted to do it in this video, but I just couldn't due to time restrictions. But for this GameCube, I have a green power LED that's like the orange LED light on a normal GameCube. It'll be green instead. So there's going to be a nice green glowing light. And so some of the paint job is also just that glow of the light, like emphasizing that glow and everything. And that'll be really cool. So that's not in this video, sadly, but I'll eventually, whenever I solder that in, I'll do some sort of little update video, and I'll probably also put this GameCube for sale. I need to do a few things to the GameCube just to make sure that it's we'll say a level of craftsmanship that I find acceptable to sell. This is my first custom GameCube other than just spray painting GameCubes, testing out spray paints. This is my first full custom, and I've tried a lot of new things, so I need to just kind of take it through the steps and make sure that if I do send it to someone, that there's not going to be any major problems with the paint job or anything like that. So with that said though, I do want to sell this one. If you're interested, feel free to DM me or just comment like, hey, I would like to buy it, or because I'm going to do bidding on it if I do sell it. Give everyone a chance to kind of to have a chance to own this piece of Prof Smoke history, right? So now I'm going in and I'm sculpting two little heads, two little cabbage baby heads for the finishing touch on this. I'm taking floral wire. We're using a lot of floral wire in these tiny sculptures to make an armature, and just because it's really hard to sculpt small and clay doesn't hold up if it's small. So instead of using clay, I use clay for the head and the body, and then we're going to go in with floral wire for all these other little details. And then I can kind of add onto the floral wire to thicken it out where it needs to be thicker and all those nice things. So you'll see how that pans out. I don't want to completely spoil what this is going to be, but I have 2 sleeping poses that I had drawn out. I was initially only going to do 1 Celebi on this GameCube, but I decided that I liked both of the sleeping poses that I had created whenever I was sketching, that I was like, you know what? Why have 1 Celebi when we can have 2? So they're going to be sleeping, little cute baby cabbages. Now this is a very delicate process because these pieces of wire are barely going into the clay. It's just a tiny bit into the clay. They're barely even on. And then we put these bad boys into the oven. Once they come out of the oven, as soon as they come out of the oven, I'm gonna go in with super glue and glue them into place as well. So that's what I did. We got it nice and baked. We glued all the limbs down. And now we're ready to paint. I'm starting out with just Mod Podge, no paint even mixed in with the Mod Podge, because I want to make sure everything's solid and together before we even begin the painting process. In this step, I also am using this clear Mod Podge to bulk out the legs and the wires. Anywhere that I want extra bulk on those wires, I just go thicker on the Mod Podge with each layer in those spots and then thinner on the normal spots. And now we have some nice green and pink paint, kind of nice flowery colors. And that's mixed with Mod Podge, so we're just building up more and more Mod Podge to make these figures just more structurally sound. And just like when I paint shinies, I'm just trying to get a color similar to what our final color will be, and then we mix that color up and do a layer of 2 of that. So we know that the one Celebi is going to be green, we know the other one's going to be pink. Spoiler alert, it's going to be a shiny Celebi. So once we have those colors down, we can actually paint our real color. Paint has a bit of transparency to it, so the undercoat color is actually important. You don't really see it, but you would notice it if it wasn't there, I guess. So we go in with a nice light green and a nice light orchid pink color, or maybe not orchid, but that's just what comes to mind when I see that color, pink. And just touching up some darker pink on the tip, kind of like a chow, a two-toned chow. Everywhere that's that darker pink, we paint it on. Give Celebi a nice little outfit, kind of Peter Pan style, Tinkerbell style vibes. I actually really like painting details like this freehand. I think I'm pretty good at it, and it just really builds my confidence up to kind of do these things like first try with no mistakes. I'm just feeling really proud of myself, honestly, like as far as my skills have come. You know, I'm really happy with how far I've come. And I'm really proud of, you know, being able to create this. And we do some nice little smiles on their sleeping faces. And for Celebi, since they have their eyes closed and they're sleeping, we need to still paint the eye shape. Celebi has the eye shape, and then there's kind of eyelid lines. It's a weird eye, but I just copied the anime and did it how they do it. This is another example of just how proud I am of my ability to freehand. Full disclosure on the pink one, I did have to paint multiple eyes, and I just took a wet rag and wiped the eye off if it wasn't perfect. Just painting a nice thin line against that hand to give the illusion of an eye behind the hand. And we do white lines for the eyelids because that's how they do it in the anime. Now Celebi actually has blue tips on its antenna, and Shiny Celebi has green tips. These are the colors of the eyes, the irises of the eyes. But since the eyes are closed, we don't have to paint those. We just paint a little tippy tip. It wouldn't be a Prof Smoke video if I didn't spin things around a lazy Susan like 100 times. There they are. Just using a bit of super glue there, and I actually decided on the green one to put a nice tuft of grass under his head like a pillow, so you can see it there. He's like got his hands resting on a big old tuft of grass. I like to think that Celebi, since it's grass type, it could grow up a nice plant, and that one has that kind of personality where it would do something like that. There we have it, the Celebi Gamecube. This is my first custom Gamecube, so there's bound to be a few little problems here and there, but I'm super happy with how it turned out. I've got a few other custom Gamecubes in the works that I've already sculpted jewels for that I'm going to be painting in the near future. I also have some other custom Gamecubes coming up as well. If you take a look at the link in the top left, you have a neutral Chow in the Chow Garden from Sonic Adventure 2. And that's gonna be just a really cool GameCube in my opinion. I love the color scheme of the blue and the yellow. And then on the right you have a Pikmin GameCube, and that's with a Bulbmin from Pikmin 2 on the jewel. So if you want to check out the videos of me making those jewels, then heck yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you all so much. It's just been really cool to be able to make this stuff. You know, I try to put everything into these projects and, you know, making these videos and everything. So I really appreciate, you know, people enjoying this stuff so much. Peace out.